I think schools need to start thinking about the fact that there's a ticking clock in the background where the type of skills that we need are the ones that make us human, that are part of our humanity. And I think that the best way to do that in a school setting is to have more time for making space for empathy and compassion and communication and nurturing those skills. And the best way to nurture those skills is to collaborate with the people who are using them on a daily basis.
Welcome to IB Matters, a podcast for those interested in learning more about IB education. We interview teachers, students, and educational leaders around the world to learn how the International Baccalaureate Framework of Education has improved their practice and how you can use it to improve education in your school. Hi, folks. Welcome back to IB Matters. And I'm here with Alex Soulsby from Thailand, or at least you're located in Thailand. Is that right, Alex?
Yeah, no, I've been based here for 13 years now, John.
Oh, great. And Alex did something I wish more of you would do, which is to reach out to me directly through the podcast contact information. And he has a great model that he's been using, and it seemed like a great thing to share with our IB world. And I think you're going to find it interesting to hear from Alex about this. So, Alex, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about why you're in Thailand, what you're doing there, and we'll get into the Magic T model in a minute.
Okay, no problem. My name's Alex Soulsby. I've been working in and around the arts, education, and cultural sector for 25 years now, and fundamentally internationally. I'm based currently in northern Thailand, working at an IB World School. My role is fundamentally that of a creative education practitioner and creative education consultant.
Okay. But you're employed by the school itself?
I am, yeah. So
Okay.
my role at the school is that of creative director. So I work within our extended leadership team, with our head of school, with our founder, and across all of the divisions in the school and across all of the IB programs.
Okay. Interesting. Tell us a little bit more about the school. So you said all the programs. Are you a K-12 or?
We're Prem International School. We were the first for IB program school in Asia. We're very proud of that fact. We've been developing that work for a number of years now, and we're incredibly lucky to not just have the resources that many schools have in terms of sports facilities and great faculty and educators, but we also have this Magic T residency program that integrates into so much of the teaching and learning that we do. We're K to 12. We have the PYP, the MYP, DP, and also the CP program as well.
Oh, good.
We, at the center of it's a wider educational institution that has various programs and different academies that sit within that campus. We have an organic farm, we have a forest school, but right in the center, we're an IB World School, and we benefit from having the different programs and the different opportunities for our students and young people to help drive the learning that we do there.
Sounds like a pretty idyllic setting. So you talk about having a farm or a forest area, whatever, a nature area. Are you in a city itself or on the edge of a city?
We're about half an hour drive from Chiang Mai, which is the northern capital of Thailand. It's the beautiful little corner of the world. And the institution was set up 25 years ago by this wonderful artist, architect, Thai aristocrat, Momtree. And he set out to create a school and an educational setting that was special and unique. And he's really managed to do that. It's a privilege to work there.
That's really interesting. That's one of the cool things is I've talked to people around the world in various settings in IB schools. And, when I talk locally here about IB, people are concerned about whether we're meeting the state standards or, in any political background, is IB a fit? And what's interesting when I hear a description of your school, it's like, wow, okay, so this IB fits in, and not only just IB, but the entire continuum fits in a program that is obviously oriented around very diverse experiences for kids. And And you're an example of that. So when you said that you are a creative director, that's not a position that most people hear. How did you end up kind of going into that role in any school?
Well, that's really interesting. So, my career in education started internationally. I set up art and drama departments within an IGCSE and A-level school, and then after about 7 years of doing the work here and also working in an IB World School in Turkey, I spent a long time working in the arts, education, and cultural sector in the UK. Then, wow, 13 years ago, I made the move to work internationally again, and I just bumped into the head of school and the then president of the wider educational institution here, and I was asked by them who I was and what I did, and I gave them my background. And I think at the time I'd just come out of doing some project work. I was the project lead on the last national campaign run by the late Sir Ken Robinson in the UK, and that opened up a wider conversation about the need for creative competencies in education and where the arts sat and so on. And then within a couple of days, I've been asked
Yeah.
to come and talk about a consultancy, and that led to series of recommendations. They were then piloted. That pilot work was at least deemed successful by the leadership team there and the board. And then that led to a full-time role that I've been in now for close to 13 years.
Fascinating. So you have, everything you mentioned in your resume involved the arts. What is your entree into the arts? Are you a visual artist? What type of artist are you?
Ah, I mean, it's interesting. I sit here at my breakfast table, even though it's the evening. But I guess my earliest entry into the arts as a youngster was for a love of the visual arts. But that quickly also encompassed music as well, and theatre. Throughout my life, the culinary arts have played a big role. I have a love of cooking, but my formal education was in the visual arts. I
Mm.
did my bachelor honors in fine art, and I focused or majored on sculpture.
Oh, okay.
So I've kind of woven around. I've worked with photography as part of my practice for a
Mm.
while. So I dabble in all kind of art forms, and I'm lucky that in the professional work that I do, I get to work with all kinds of creative practitioners and creative thinkers, philosophers, and other people who have creative thinking central to what they do. So I picked up a little bit of all of it along the way,
Yeah.
I guess.
Just a love for it and an openness to all of it. It sounds wonderful. So you reached out to me to share this concept or this model called the Magic Tea. I love hearing about how you ended up where you are, but let's talk about the Magic Tea model and maybe give everyone a sketch of kind of what it is.
Sure, absolutely. So, if you will imagine walking into a high quality museum, art gallery, or institution, or cultural center, theatre, think like the Met, or in the UK, the National Theatre, or one of our national museums. One of the things that all of these institutions have in common is, along with the high quality work that they provide through the exhibitions or the shows, the engagements they have for the public, is that many of them will have, in fact, all high quality institutions generally have an education department. It's an education wing that will sit within that building, and it runs kind of autonomously, connecting with schools, connecting with community groups, doing outreach and otherwise. The Magic Tea model really is an attempt to take that thinking and to flip it on its head and say that if you are a high quality school, or if you're a school that values the work that you do on the day to day, but also in the big picture, then you should have an arts and cultural component. And
Mm.
in the case of the Magic Tea model, it's really saying high quality educational institutions have the responsibility to provide an arts and cultural offering that allow their schools to connect more greatly with the diverse body of their students and faculty, parents, wider community, but specifically that wider community component. How does the school ensure that it's able to take the learning that's happening within what can sometimes be a bit of a silo and take it out into the community so that the community can also come into the educational space, and there's less of that rigidity, if you like, the walls that kind of somehow make schools seem like they operate in a bubble-like mentality at times. So the Magic Team model, it's symbiotic because obviously it connects to the learning and the teaching and otherwise it's taking place within the school. But it responds to it in the same way that an education department in a cultural center responds to the exhibitions or to the shows or to the work that's happening in those institutions. I mean, Sir Ken Robinson often talked about, the need to nurture the inner mind of a young person. But for me, having outside voices coming in, whether they be a writer, a filmmaker, a philosopher, an environmental activist, or otherwise, it helps to prod and provoke the curriculum. I think it helps to diversify learning outcomes. I think that it opens up discourse and dialogue among the student body in such a manner that it takes away from the obsession of standardization, if you like, or working towards predetermined outcomes. Fits in with that kind of IB philosophical the philosophical importance that the IB places on inquiry. I think having outside voices coming in really helps to nurture that in meaningful and valuable ways.
And are you seeking specifically outside voices that have backgrounds in culture or arts of the community? Like you're not going out to find the local microbiologist necessarily.
Well, I mean, it's funny you should say that because it's certainly within the thinking of how the program is evolving. But certainly it started really by looking at how to create greater equity, if you like, for the space that the arts can take within a school environment. And it's definitely the case that during the 10 years or so that it's been running now in an annual capacity. So we have 8 key residencies that happen per year. Sometimes that's one individual. Sometimes it might be, for example, this week we have an ensemble of 4 practitioners coming in that include practitioners with an environmental focus, but also musicians, artists who are working with AI and in a kind of interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary way. But I would say that in the annual residencies that we have, if you look at the period of time that we've been running, we've had, as I say, political activists, we've had presidential advisors, we've had very well-respected philosophers come in. But fundamentally, I guess the single largest framing for the people who come in and collaborate tends to be one art form or another. But as I mentioned before, that's also included the culinary arts as well.
With your location, are these folks coming in physically? Are they working virtually with you, or how's that connecting?
I would say 95% of the time that is physical presence on the campus. We have a wonderful relationship now that's been about a decade in the making with the International Schools Theatre Association, ISTA. So they've historically been responsible for nurturing and developing the Group 6 subjects, specifically with film and theatre. But they've had a lot of they've had their fingers in the developmental pie of looking at how we can provide professional development for creative thinking and so on and so forth. The projects that we do with ISTA, that generates an income. That income is then fed straight back into the operational costs of the residency. So that provides travel stipends, it provides food for the artists. We've used it to invest in accommodation that we can house our practitioners in as well. Yeah, that's fundamentally how it's worked.
Yeah, so you have almost like a little campus dorm for the people that come in.
Absolutely, it's beautiful. They come from wherever they are in the world, and we like to pride ourselves on we're now at 500 or so inquiries and applications per year, so we get to work with artists and practitioners and thinkers from all around the world. And as you say, yeah, they come in, they have their own private apartment, they have their own studio space. It's an exchange in terms of resources and time and thinking, whereby about half the day they're able to sit and make use of the facilities that we have, make use of the environment, whether that's to produce their painting or to write their books or edit their movies or work on political manuscripts, whatever it might
Yeah,
be. And the rest of the time, they're working with me. They're connecting to the learning. They're developing ways in which they can take ideas that are at the essential heart of their practice and form them in a manner when not just that are going to be accessible and useful and of interest, hopefully, to young people, but they themselves are developing as practitioners so that they're more empowered to go into other schools and to share their thinking. And in the case of obviously being based in an IB school, they learn about the programs, they learn about the philosophy, and they nurture and they sculpt and they cultivate the workshops and engagements that they do in a manner where it connects to the outcomes of all of the different programs, depending on the artist or the practitioner. Obviously,
sure.
it's not
Yeah.
every artist of every program, but they're developed as artist practitioners with a knowledge and understanding of the IB philosophy.
Yeah. So as you were talking, I was wondering about the about that with the different. You mentioned Group 6. For those listening that don't know much about the diploma program or CP, or maybe are working in an early years capacity, Group 6 is designated as the arts portion of the framework for diploma program and the career related program. And there's some obvious connections there because that includes, like you mentioned, film and visual arts, music is there. But when you look at, the requirements for the diploma program in particular, the students are required to, be comprehensive and use all 6 groups. Do you find that your artists are working more with younger age because those students have more time to devote to kind of the transdisciplinary work, including arts, or are they able to do that with even the diploma program group 4 science or group or 5 math or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really interesting, and I can give you a few examples. Most of the practitioners who apply and who are accepted are accepted because they've got really strong practice and they've got really clear ideas. What I'm constantly astounded by is the diversity of relevance that those ideas might have to different areas of learning that are happening in a school. So it's not unusual for any given practitioner to come in. So say maybe we've worked a couple of times with the philosopher Nigel Warburton, who wrote A Little History of Philosophy. This year we worked with Sky Cleary from Columbia University, and they will come in and in a given day they might start in the morning working with me talking about the various areas of their work that they're developing, because obviously they're using the time within the program to work on their own work, and then we'll have a coffee and we'll go down and we'll be in a grade 3 classroom, looking at what it is to unpack ideas through philosophical lenses. We may then finish there, grab lunch, and the next thing we're in a TOK, theory of knowledge classroom, looking at knowledge claims and how we perceive positions of knowledge. And then from the end of that day, we could be sitting and critiquing in a diploma visual arts class. And each residency, each practitioner, each day is the content and the way it inputs and connects to the learning in the school is bespoke depending on the residency.
Sure. Yeah, very custom. And that's why you need somebody in your position, the cultural coordinator. So we say, what do you call yourself again? You're the creative director. And so you need
Sure.
someone that has all those connections. You're like the TOK hub. You have to find those connections. So, the elephant in the room is the name Magic Tea. Why is it called Magic Tea?
Well, it was taken actually. It was taken from the models that it was born out of. So it's simply museums, art institutions, galleries, cultural centres, and theatres. So
Hmm.
line that all up, it's Magic T.
Yeah.
And that particular acronym was born out of a conversation with Professor Noah Sobe, who was the primary driver behind the UNESCO Reimagining All Our Futures Together report, and is now the chief of section for higher education at UNESCO. But it was during a great chat with him that he kind of said, "Hey, if you rearrange these letters, you get this acronym. That's the kind of acronym that sticks." So, yeah, he was right. It sticks.
So as a creative director, so from what you've just been describing so far, you have the knowledge base of an IB coordinator as well. Do you have a separate IB coordinator for each program in your continuum school?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. No, we're very lucky. We have a PYP coordinator, MYP, DP, and CP coordinator. And depending on the nature of the residency collaboration projects that we do, I will spend more or less time with that coordinator and the department head or the grade level teacher. But yeah, we're very lucky to have coordinators in all program posts. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I talk a little bit about the practical nuts and bolts of that? You mentioned in passing about having a fund that generated some income to help you bring in these consultants. Can you talk a little bit more about how that comes about and maybe other people can replicate at least part of it?
Yeah, I mean, like at its heart, the model, and it's only one part of the work that I do, but the Magic T model comes about through this resource exchange, and that includes the work that we do with ISTA. ISTA is the International Schools Theatre Association. It's an incredible organization that's been operating for more than 25 years. Their executive director, Dr. Michael Binden, he used to be the curriculum director for the Group 6 subjects at the IB. They have hundreds of partnership schools across the world, and they do various collaborative events in the form of festivals, training for teachers, engagement for students doing theatre at diploma level, along with a whole host of other things that they do across the spectrum of an IB World School. But we are lucky enough that we have a partnership with them where we are one of their centers for international innovation and creativity. And we have an annual event, which over the last few years has taken the form of an environmental symposium. So that means bringing together artists and theatre practitioners and up to 200 plus young people. They work over a 3-day period to use specific provocations to explore the environment and what we can do to make a difference. And that then ends up being a celebration and a sharing and a performance at the end of the time that they're with us. And then, as I say, the money that's taken from that is invested back into the Artist Residency Thailand program, which is our Magic T model at the school. But certainly, we also have events where we might bring in philosophers and invite the public to come along. The public will pay contributory ticket prices to come in and to listen and be involved in the seminars. Our TOK students in the past have also, been involved in that as well. But we'll work with musicians that come in. They will give concerts, storytellers, poets, and otherwise. And again, each time it's an opportunity monetizing it is not the focus per se, but it is an opportunity as well as to create rich and engaging opportunities for the students, the families, and the faculty. It does give us the opportunity also to use it to raise money.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. So you can put on a show, or you can offer a storytelling or a TED Talk like opportunity for people to share and come in and do those kind of things. The other thing about this, you mentioned community, and we always talk about community in kind of general terms. The literal community that surrounds you, what is the connection there to the people that live in the area and also the parents?
It's definitely the case that the work of the program has equal value coming in terms of the artists and the practitioners and the thinkers as it does going out. So it's very often that work that starts and is nurtured and born out of the program in the school will have different ways in which it connects with our wider community. So that could be a parent or a community engagement, which is just specific to the school.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a wider performance engagement where we might have members of the Chiang Mai community coming in. But often it goes further than that as well. So we've certainly worked with creative practitioners to develop work in the school that's then gone out into hill tribe communities of undocumented individuals, refugees, asylum seekers. We've done work that goes out into the schools and brings the stories of the young people in those disenfranchised communities to life through our students, but via skills that they've learned from our brilliant director of theatre, but also the artists that come in and have been involved in nurturing and developing those projects. We have relationships, and again connected to this project, with local universities in terms of the culinary arts context, which is slightly less of a focus these days than it used to be, and it's certainly been the case that when chefs or cooks or culinary artists have come into the school, the skills that the students have learned have then gone back out into the hospitality sector, the hotels and restaurants in the community as well, as part of their CP activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So this might be a good time. Maybe I should have asked this earlier. Where do you get your students? Where are they coming from?
So our student base at the moment is truly international. We're made up of more than 30 different nationalities. Post-COVID, our heaviest weightings are Thai, American, Chinese, Korean, but we have Bhutanese students, French, German, Russian. So it's a broad cross section of young people from around the world.
And you teach in English?
We teach in English, we do.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the connections to the subjects, the sciences, the math, the history, the language arts. How does Magic Tea come to play? You know, I'm a science teacher. How does it come to play in a science classroom?
I can think of a couple of examples here. So it wasn't that long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we worked with a wonderful American glass artist called Jeremy Popelka. And for a period of a month, we had in total just over half a dozen artists who were working using glass as their primary medium. And obviously that was great for our art students.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also fantastic for our science students because the kind of physical, the visceral holding and touching and seeing the process of melting a solid into a liquid and then reforming it suddenly makes the conceptual stuff on the page or what they're exploring in different ways in the laboratories come to life in a very tangible way.
Yeah.
We work with data mural artists where our students have spent time collecting data that pertains to the frequency of colors in an environment and then applying different equations to that data that come about as a physical visible construct, and then working with artists to take the end result of that visibility, if you like, of data constructs and map it out as murals onto architecture. And again, the equations on the page, yes, you can bring them to life in a classroom, but if you're working with an outside practitioner and you're scaling them up in a manner where that thinking is visible to you because it encapsulates an entire building or at least a side of a building, I mean, it has tangible outcomes in terms of how the knowledge is processed in a manner that I would say arguably is broadly more appealing to a wider cross section of young people, simply because the young people who got it just through the work that was done in the classroom, they're still going to get it through the engagement that they do with the practitioners. But maybe for that demographic of young people who needed it unpacked in a certainly different, you know, in a different way, it certainly makes a huge difference. So the model and the collaborations and the connections and the projects, the approaches used and the outcomes, they may not regularly connect as often as they do with our, our music, our theatre, our visual arts, or maybe not as regularly as it connects in our PYP setting. But there's definitely a long history of tangible and beneficial outcomes from bringing those types of collaborations into the forefront at an MYP level, and also with our diploma students as well,
Hmm.
in subjects that are outside of the arts.
Oh, I totally believe in that. I think that anytime you can make the learning personal, the interest and the engagement will generate inquiry and curiosity about what's next or what's connected to that. And when you were talking about the glass, I'm thinking about color and light and all the things that are integrated into that kind of work that have science concepts built into them. And listeners who are connected with especially the younger years like the PYP and the MYP understand the cross-disciplinary nature of learning. And it's really so important when you're working with the arts to see that that's the case. I know it's to me it's fascinating to see, and I mentioned in our kind of lead up to getting together today that I have a grandson who's in an art school, and I just learned that he has a piece of art going into a gallery, and his piece of art that's going in the gallery is actually a drawing of an otter, so that he did for science. So it's the kind of thing that definitely has all these different connections.
And he's at Boston Academy of the Arts, yeah.
Boston Academy of the Arts. That's right. Yeah. What listeners are going to say, okay, that's a really cool model and everything. I'd like to do at least some of it. What are the challenges, do you think, or maybe you experience these directly in getting things going, but if someone wants to kind of bring this model to their school in at least some way, what are the challenges? What are the things that, maybe you've seen and could help them with?
So I think there are a number of challenges. I think the single greatest one is what the brilliant Steve Siddell at Harvard calls the four-part harmony. And that is that in order to have arts and culture driving learning in your school in a meaningful way, you have to have more than one voice doing the driving. You really have to have meaningful buy-in from your leadership team, from your faculty, from your parents, and from your board.
Yeah.
And I think if you can get that right, if everyone's singing from the same sheet, then that totally and utterly helps to overcome some of the problems that you find, especially in an international school environment where you have that revolving door. So
Mhm.
you have people coming in fairly regularly, different voices occupying leadership roles that will change, departmental roles, even faculty in classrooms. I mean, they're human beings. So having the four-part harmony in place and everybody agreed that this is what we're doing is definitely the primary one that I would say. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned international schools, but also most of our schools in the U.S. here are public schools. We also have that revolving door, and often it's the leaders. They're the ones that change, and then your IB staff is trying to convince the new leader that IB is worth the time and effort to do it. And if you have a four-part harmony and you have three parts singing and a new part comes in, you have to get them, like you said, singing from the same music. That's an important part of it. And I think part of it is having a strong, once you get established like you are, it must be easier to bring new people in because they can see they're going into a successful program. One of the things I think about IB that's so good for schools is that it is a framework that exists and has lots of examples of success. And as you train people to be part of it, they're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak, each time. So what else, where would you start if you were going to start this up again in a new school? Let's say you decided to go to another place. Where would you start to do this? How would you start?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to drive awareness, and for me, the awareness component is becoming increasingly more important because I think that there's a tsunami coming towards us, which most of us are already aware of in terms of artificial intelligence, and the way that schools are having to pivot in order to not bury their heads in the sand regarding that reality and the way in which the education system is going to have to change. I know the IB are looking at the changes they're going to make by 2030. And I think a lot of schools are beginning to have those conversations already, not just because of AI, but just because of the types of skills that are wanted in the job sector. So I think that like raising awareness that there are things that can be put in place to help nurture the types of skills that were not just at the forefront of what happened after the Industrial Revolution is certainly a great way to start. So raising the awareness and creating a desire, because I think for a lot of teachers, community and the young people who engage in a model like this, they get a huge amount out of it. It
Hmm.
helps to diversify toolkits. It helps to nurture student agency. It brings new ideas to teachers who've perhaps just been carrying around what they refer to as a suitcase curriculum from place to
Yeah.
place. But I also think it's about the knowledge as well. I think that comes back to the role of the creative director. I think being able to let people know what an outside voice can bring, what outside expertise can bring through particular lenses and how they're relevant to the teaching and learning that might be happening in the school, and how it can be of value to that school. All of those things are super important. And then I think it's about looking at what the school can bring to the offer in terms of the resources that are there. Certainly a lot of schools, I mean, you mentioned Boston Academy of the Arts before, but those inner city schools, they have resources, be it theatres, dance studios, art studios, and the design labs that are really, on the whole, quite well equipped. And a
Hmm.
lot of ensembles, theatre groups, or otherwise, really struggle to find those spaces. So the knowledge in terms of understanding how resource exchanges might work, what a theatre ensemble might be willing to give to a school in return for being able to use a space in the evening, what a graduate of a master's program in design might be able to bring to student laboratory workshops in return for access to use of the laser printers or otherwise.
Yeah, for
Some
sure.
of it, some of
Yeah.
it's pretty basic
Yeah,
stuff.
no, that's when you were saying that, I wrote it down as that resource exchanges. I didn't really think of it that way. Obviously, it happens, but we, at least in my experience, we're always offering our gyms to local sports teams, but we should offer our art rooms to artists who maybe need a little more space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that we don't leave anything out that you might want to share about the school.
So, I mean, one of the things, I mean, we touched on it a little bit, and it might be good to come back to the UNESCO component. There's a lot of talk in various highly respected institutions, from the World Economic Forum to the OECD, about the need for young people to have great competencies in the fields of co-collaboration and communication, the ability to think critically and solve problems in cross-cultural situations. And I think that we're we're kind of good in schools at making space for teamwork in sport, and the IB is probably the best learning framework for inquiry in some ways. But what we're not very good at is necessarily finding the space in our education systems for nurturing empathy, compassion, solidarity, and the exploration of how we see or believe something to be true. I mean, TOK does that to some degree, but it's not really as central as it could be, and as frequent as it could be. And what I would say is that through having external voices coming in, where the practice and careers and daily thinking of those voices are concerned with the arts or culture, communication, expression, being human, I think that it's fertile ground for nurturing the types of skills that AI certainly doesn't have at the moment and likely will not have for quite some time. I think that declarative knowledge and kind of procedural knowledge, how we do things, the conceptual knowledge stuff, that's already there in these large language models in these AI systems, and young people are using them to, by and large, write most of their most of the essays that they submit for most of their subjects. But the epistemic stuff, the kind of epistemological, what is true, why is it true, why is it important stuff, not only is that not the realm of the AI systems now, even though they're growing and growing rapidly more and more quickly and being able to doing more and more incredible things on a daily basis, that's not their shtick. And I think that there's too much talk and emphasis in schools at the moment on how do we integrate AI in such a manner that it can't be used to cheat, or that our young people will still master these areas of knowledge and learn all of this declarative stuff that they will then get tested on, and we will standardize that, and that will see how they will go into universities and otherwise. I think schools need to start thinking about the fact that there's a ticking clock in the background, where the type of skills that we need are the ones that make us human, that are part of our humanity, and that need to coexist with these systems that will, by and large, in the capitalist world in which we live in, be more and more ubiquitous, simply because they're going to make companies more money, because they save money by automating things rather than employing people. So if we're going to compete, we need to compete via nurturing the things that make us human. And I think that the best way to do that in a school setting is to have more time for making space for empathy and compassion and communication and nurturing those skills. And the best way to nurture those skills is to collaborate with the people who are using them on a daily basis.
Yeah, and in arts and culture, because when you look back at the earliest evidence of being human, it's the drawings on the wall. When you think about it, and the clay pots that were left behind and things like that. So, I love that summary that you just made. It's a lovely way to think about it, and I think that is you've articulated the concern of the ticking clock in the background. And I think all of us that are in education understand that idea, but you articulated it very well. And that's what makes you a great creative director, right?
That's very well. That's
Good.
very kind of you to say so.
So I want to honor your time, and I know it's late where you are. I thank you so much for bringing this up, and I'm hoping that Alex will share any links that you shared. Some links with me. The paper that you sent is really fascinating and kind of fleshes this out a little bit. But it's great to have your voice added to the paper.
Yeah, I mean, if people are interested in the work, then they can find out more about it by going to my website, which is www.alexsoulsby.com. You can also search me on LinkedIn as Alex Soulsby, FRSA, which is I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts, recognized for this work in education that I've been doing over the last few years, and that there are people out there who are interested in getting involved in the conversation. We've recently launched the International Arts and Imagination Network. There were some great contributors to that launch, including Professor Steve Siddell from Harvard and Noah Sobe, two people who I've touched on in the conversation. And I think moving forward, education is about communication and dialogue, and as an educator, I'm passionate about communicating and conversing with other people who are interested.
Yeah, so the links will be there in our podcast notes as well, and you can reach out to Alex, and I appreciate your openness to that, because it is a dialogue, and we all listening to this are interested enough to kind of learn more about these kinds of things. So again, thank you, Alex, for being here today, and I wish you well, and I appreciate your time.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
You can learn much more about the IB Pre-K through 12 continuum of education using links in our podcast notes, as well as on the IB website at ibo.org. We have a new way to connect with us. At the beginning of every set of podcast notes is a link to text us. If you have a comment, recommendation, or want to appear on the podcast, it's simple to just send us a text from your phone and let us know what you're thinking or how we're doing. Now that we have over 120 IB Matters episodes covering a range of subjects, you can use our podcast webpage, which is organized by program and by topic. The link to the website is also in those podcast notes. Please find all our episodes wherever you get your podcast and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future programs. Join our over 4,000 followers on Twitter, now known as X, at MattersIB. Also help us spread the word about IB by liking, sharing, and reviewing the IB Matters links in your own feeds and social networks. In our time on the air, we've been heard in 180 countries, a testament to the global reach of the IB.